Okay, Caledon Forest, the next of the starter maps. One of the later ones to be added to the game. I think the last one that the devs made was Metrica Province. So this was probably penultimate. I don't know for sure, but I think that's likely. Especially considering, again, to look back at the convention demos, which ones existed at which times. So opening up very quickly again here, we will see that we're in one of these new bonus hearts that got implemented many years after the original release. This one I never really quite got because it's so quick to do. You just kick the trees, maybe hit a few termites, and you're done. Like, there's a lot of development effort that goes into that, and it becomes something like 6 seconds worth of content for players who know. And I acknowledge totally new people coming into the game that, again, used to the controls and stuff, probably will get a little bit more playtime out of it. But, I mean, really, don't see what it's going for. So actually, I think this footage is really quite impressive. Very, very speedy clear. Only about 45 minutes for what I've always considered to be the longest of the starter maps. I suppose if you're efficient about it, you can do wonderful things. This is a very vertical map. It's a lot like the Norn map, Wayfarer Foothills, which we haven't seen just yet. And is a really fun one, particularly considering Guild Wars 1 locations. See, while we're down here in the south, we're actually overlapping with some Eye of the North areas, as you can see on the map here. But up to the north of the Caledon Forest, we're overlapping with initial Prophecies release stuff that was of a very different quality and contained very different enemies, and it's a weird time jump there to experience two very, very different areas of content in the same Guild Wars 2 package. Then you've got the simple fact that Guild Wars 2 is so much more robust in the kind of environments that it can offer us. This map has some of the most beautiful stuff in the entire game. Not just out of the starter maps, but the whole game. Like, this is the first map, I think, for most people, where they see the Tengu Wall. Yeah, you can glimpse the Tengu Wall in Kessex Hills and some other places, but it's here in Caledon Forest that you really get to see it in its huge, full-length glory against the waterline. Really incredible. You get to spend a lot of time with the Tengu themselves as you move around this map. There are something like 4 jumping puzzles on this map, plus a hidden, well, I think there's 3 jumping puzzles and then a hidden like development jumping puzzle that I guess the devs never finished. I would love one day to find out why there are so many JPs on this map. You've got the hidden troll jumping puzzle somewhere near where we are right now in a very obscure little hole. You've got the you've even got hidden areas, like in the Scrit area there's a hidden like section to a cavern, which now you can be incentivized to go to for guild missions, but back at launch was very, very hidden. You've got like a double jumping puzzle, Morgan's Spiral, leading into the Dream Dark Reverie, I think it's called. And then, yeah, a development one as well, where you can break out of the map and find a weird chamber that reminds you probably a little bit of X-Men. It's just crazy to me, and I guess eventually they decided enough is enough. Oh, and not to mention one of the Asura labs with the platforms that you can turn on and off. These are just all massive highlights to me, and reasons why I think Caledon is just brilliant. The other thing about Caledon is obviously it's Sylvari-centric. And of all the new stories that Guild Wars 2 introduced, and it did a fair amount of them, really the Sylvari were the ones that were treated best, had the most new dialogue, most serious, decent emphasis. There's a reason why, especially in 2012, a lot of people came out loving the Sylvari and really being into them. It's not just that the concept was really good, in terms of not being too tropey and, you know, exploring something fairly new, but it was that in-game they had so much care and attention to detail. A lot of that comes out through the ambient dialogue in this map. So here we are, we're at the Morgan Spiral now, which for map completion we don't actually have to spend much time at. You just look at it, it's very pretty. I mentioned in the previous video the stealth consumable that you could get over in the Plains of Ashford. Well, here was another one of them. There's an event where, is it a member of the Inquest or just an Asura? Essentially drops down into this area, you help them on a little bit of an escort up towards the north, and they would sell you another stealth consumable, which again had a balance pass in more recent years, so it has lost some value. I think on my main I do still have a ton of them, but because I never really use them anymore, I never come to these events to buy them anymore, you know. You can buy, I've bought probably like 250 and it's lasted me something like 2 years. I'm sure someone watching this video has had a very different experience and still spams the hell out of those, but to me they feel like an old part of the game now. So yeah, as we round forwards, we actually get to go to another really interesting heart up north here. One of my favorites in the game. This is a rare example of a heart where you can actually lose progress. So there's kind of a morality thing going on. First of all, a cutscene to enter as well. You assume the disguise of a nightmare courtier, and you're trying to sabotage them. Now, the idea of who's right, the regular Sylvari or the nightmare court, it is a question of ethics and worldview and so on. And they let you actually, like, pick for yourself. Most hearts, the question is always, you have to be the hero. But here, if you want to, like, abuse these dogs, if you want to whip them, if you want to make them feel bad, if you want to threaten them, you can do it. You actually can. You can pretend to be a proper nightmare court Sylvari. And you will, the consequence of that is you'll be kind of punished, only in as much as the heart progress will decrease. And I love that. I love that that's clearly possible in the game. And it's entirely opt-in here. And I don't think most people would really be punished. I guess in a way, this gets very casual players to actually read dialogue, which Guild Wars 2 very rarely does. You know, you actually have to know what you're clicking. A bit like how in Queensdale, that Etin event kind of made you read the dialogue. Here, it's a similar thing. But we don't see ArenaNet ever again, I don't think, execute this possibility, even though it's clearly there in the engine. For all these Living World episodes that they've done and updates in more recent years, any of them could have still had hearts where you lose progress if you don't do it quite right. I think they're timid about that because there's been so much feedback about hearts and people being disgruntled about hearts and they're not quite right, that if the devs were nowadays to introduce something like that, as cool as it is fundamentally, I think more people are interested in their own efficiency and their own rewards and their own speed, that they would just find it to be a nuisance. They wouldn't. They're not. A lot of people aren't looking for actual entertainment value anymore. They're looking for reward for playtime, and so you can't really be artistic. You can't do fun stuff. But in 2012, they could, at least here. This heart was probably the first one I ever did on this map. I don't know. I have fond memories of this one. You can eat the mushrooms. You'll either grow very big or you'll shrink very small. And then based on whether you're big or small, it affects the kind of things you can do. So when you're small, you can, and this is a hideous notion, really, you can crawl inside the spider nests and just chase them out. I mean, what a hideous, scary thought. I mean, I'm a bit of an arachnophobe, so don't like that one at all. But you could do that. And then if you're big, what was it? You could clear rocks or something? Not sure. This area of the map, as much as I like Caledon Forest, always confuses me, because the route to go north is never quite that clear, and there's some extra map objectives to the bottom left of the map that are easily missed. In particular, a heart where you have to transform into an oak heart. Curious to see how we'll be doing it on this footage super efficiently. And I always miss one or always miss the other, and then it's just annoying. I never end up quite where I wanted to be. One of these hearts is super annoying as well. This one here, I think it's this one. Support the Wardens of Wardenhurst, which we've done really well here. But there's... No, it can't be this one. There's a heart which is bordering on a beach. And in theory, it would be quick to beat if one of the dynamic events in the area was going on where Risen are assaulting you. But it very rarely is, so it usually takes ages to do. I guess I'll talk more about it when we get there. And the Risen are an interesting note as well. ArenaNet kind of set up the idea that many of the races had a particular beef with a particular dragon. So you can say, for example, the Norn have got a particular beef with Jormag, and the Char had a particular beef with Kralkatorrik, you know, for scarring Ascalon with the brand. And not just Ascalon, but all the way up north to the Char homelands too. And maybe you can say that the humans had a bit of a beef with Zhaitan, and maybe that's why Zhaitan was the first one they chose. Anyway, for this Sylvari, you can certainly say it's Zhaitan too, if not all Elder Dragons. And while all other races in their opening maps start preoccupied with other things like bandits and centaurs and ogres and ghosts, for the Sylvari, you get to deal with the Risen straight away. I mean, yeah, they have their split faction, the Nightmare Court, who are present here, but you're immediately into Elder Dragon minions. I liked that because that very much speaks to the Sylvari's true nature, it feels, of fighting against the Elder Dragons or their association with the Elder Dragon forces. And that meant a lot for the story, but it also kind of had another double benefit, which is that the devs didn't have to work so hard on enemy variety for this race, because they could just use all the kinds of enemies we're going to be fighting throughout the whole story anyway. And that's good, but on the other hand, I sort of feel like if you first ever made a Sylvari character in Guild Wars 2, you might have ended up quite disappointed because it's gonna be 80 levels and however many hours of fighting Risen, really. They'll occasionally splash a few other little things in here or there, but it's Risen from top to bottom. At least when you play as a human, you're not dealing with Risen for a while. And if you pick the right lesser race, you won't be dealing with Risen there either. And, you know, there's several arcs where you get a bit of a break from it, and then finally it's all Risen when you get to Or. But for Sylvari, it's kind of straight away, and the devs never actually made these super early game Risen any different to a lot of the later game ones. There's actually a lot of differences in terms of nameplates and stuff, but in terms of actual mechanics and stuff, you don't see much. So here's something interesting. Where we're currently standing is actually a duplicate of the Dream tutorial. So we've seen in each of the starter areas, you can revisit where you did the tutorial. In a theory for the Sylvari, that shouldn't be true because the Sylvari's tutorial is in the Dream. It doesn't have to be anywhere real. Well, it's here. I guess the devs didn't want to make a whole separate extra map. They were looking to be as efficient as possible. And so you might not realize it because you enter this area, this like copse or whatever, from the north to south, and you might not have been thinking about it. But this is exactly where we fight the shadow of the dragon. And in fact, if you look up at the big wall in the background there, it almost feels a little bit reminiscent of that. There's no NPCs that draw your attention to that fact. There's no way for your character to say, oh, this feels familiar. I don't think ArenaNet ever wanted you to quite notice that this is the Dream area that you're in right now, because, again, it doesn't make much sense. But I have to kind of respect it. A lot of the time, what I enjoy about games, and when I'm thinking about the development of games, I like to see how the devs can be really efficient with stuff. I hate, in some ways I love seeing when there's like a weird element of a game that is hardly noticed and is barely used. But on the other hand, I always feel sad when I see that because I'm like, man, this was of some quality they could have repurposed elsewhere. And this is an example of ArenaNet repurposing, which is good. So anyway, yeah, well, you can see we've expertly gone down. That's the really tricky heart as well that I was mentioning earlier that I always find myself missing. And I always find a little bit of a problem to get to. Of course, if you're using mounts with the Springer, I think navigation all around here is very easy now. But it's a starter map, so I'm sure there's a lot of accounts that won't have the Springer. Particularly when the game comes to Steam at the end of this year, or November. I wonder how many people will just run straight into POF to get that stuff, or they'll be playing the game sort of more as it was originally intended, like we are. Which I think is very cool. I mean, we're using extra little things like portals and blinks and whatnot. Interesting trick coming up here. We're climbing up this waterfall. Is this intended? I've never done this, but climbing up this waterfall lets us get straight into the Nightmare Court base, Sandy Cove Beach. A lot of you guys might recognize this from one of the personal story steps. This is where you come to free some people from the jail cells. And then you kind of flee out with Kaith later. But the only reason we want to go in there for map completion is to grab the point of interest there. And we can kind of curl back out into the beach. More areas that I have a lot of fond memories of right here. There's a good variety of weak creatures around here that I grinded on by running large circuits around the center of the map in this area for more Slayer achievements back in the day. It seems so weird probably to many of you that I did that, but I wasn't to know that I'd be playing the game for 8 years straight and eventually those things would, you know, naturally come in. I wasn't to know that they wouldn't really update it very much. Now, to be fair, the most recent expansion did add a bunch more Slayer achievements, and I hope that End of Dragons does the same too. But at the time, you know, I wanted to get the stuff, so this is what I did. We had more limited opportunities. And I don't know, I'm not really too much one for just grinding, but if you're in the right mindset, it can be kind of therapeutic and kind of fun. And so I have all these weird, like, random spots of the open world that I can remember stuff like this. I love to think that many of you guys watching also have really prominent memories about just specific strange places, like because maybe you had a conversation with a guildie there or something. In fact, back in Queensdale, one of the hills that you can run to always reminds me of a long conversation I once had with an old guildie talking about Guild Wars 1 GVGs. And I haven't spoken to that person in years and years and years now, but whenever I go to that spot in-game, I think of them, which is really odd. So I'm sure there's a more efficient way to do this heart. You don't actually have to shovel and dig these things out, do you? Maybe I've just got lucky usually when I come here and there's an event going on. Undoubtedly, a ton of Risen would be participating in it somehow. But this one does look like it's a little bit trickier. This is not the same beach event that I was talking about before. But that whole thing of chasing the Sire Moth around, I'm not actually sure what that interaction is. I might not have ever done that. Get some Hylek. Now, there are some dangerous areas in Caledon. Specifically, there's a Crate Witch, which we have to deal with later. Or can sometimes be spawning in the middle of a map completion run. And they can be pretty scary. And one of the hero challenges too, we're actually running over to it now, is this giant worm. And I remember really struggling with the big worm hero challenge back when the game came out. I guess we'll see how well this core Mesmer does here. It's just nestled in on this rock, and it's a simple thing. Defeat the mysterious creature from this patch of ground. The veteran ancient Maguma worm. Worms remain to this day one of my favorite enemy types in this whole franchise. I know they're not particularly unique to Guild Wars, but I've always looked at them very fondly. You know, my start was back in pre-searing Ascalon in Guild Wars 1, and back there were a ton of worms in the fields. So seeing these Maguma ones makes me smile. And they're actually really big too. It was very rare you'd see such big worms in Guild Wars 1, and if they were like siege worms and super deadly stuff. But yeah, I guess we handily deal with that challenge now in 2020. And yeah, you see all these earth elementals? I grinded on these. And these spiders, I grind on these. And there's bats in one of the caves, or along one of the shorelines. I would grind on them, and I'd just keep running circles in this exact area here. We're just north of that Nightmare Court event, and here is where the witch was that I was talking about. Looks like it's not here this run, but getting that point of interest at the Zapattle grounds, if it's being guarded by a champion or just a really deadly veteran, can be a real struggle. So we're going to be looking at the Tengu Wall now, and we're along the water's edge. People with skimmers can run through this real quick, and I actually think this area of the map is somewhat improved with skimmer. I guess with that one, we'll be moving a little bit slower. But let's talk about the Champion of the Sun. So 2 great beasts remain. Defeat them to help the Hylek honor the sun. This is one of those, again, like slightly more obscure meta events that people don't participate in too much. The other meta event here leads to a full-blown world boss. It's up near the dungeon entrance, and I'm sure many of you guys are more than familiar with. This one essentially creates some like little arenas that when you walk inside them, you transform into another creature, and you're being asked to destroy an enemy while you are that other creature. It's a cool meta event, and it's a meta event that I am particularly hazy on with the details because I just never feel too incentivized to go and do it. But any kind of meta that really hooks into the Hylek, I tend to enjoy in the game. Like when we get to Bloodtide Coast and Sparkfly Fen, we'll see little things like this. I kind of really want to see, and I don't know if you guys agree with this, but a pass or an update to Guild Wars 2 that props up a bunch of these sort of minor meta events somehow. I'm not sure what I'm really looking for with that. Maybe that they just expand the cycle of world bosses to include some of these ones that don't even necessarily have world bosses involved with them. I think most people are familiar with this Champion of the Sun meta because the voice acting that's tied to it will play across vast distances. Like, you will hear the dialogue for this from really far away. And it doesn't exactly, even though you hear the dialogue, it doesn't exactly lead you to help out a lot of the time. Usually we're on some other adventure or some other quest. So one of the more tricky vistas here. I actually find that quite a few of the vistas on this map are trickier. I think it's because they rely on these like thin, narrow wooden planks. It's not exactly the same caliber as what we saw in Queensdale or the Plains of Ashford, where they were a little bit more forgiving. You know, the Plains of Ashford was only a challenge in as much as you had to figure out where the first rock was. Here, it's actually some precision jumping you got to do. So we move in here to Maben Market. This is the equivalent of Claypool. And you see, it's just kind of a couple of Sylvari houses. Grown houses. I mean, that's some cool lore about the Sylvari, the way that they grow their own houses out of the ground. And they look pretty, but it's really not anywhere near as good as the Claypool stuff, I don't think. I guess for map completion, we'll just skip through. Obviously, we don't really need to do any crafting here. There's this nice heart here, which is probably one of the most substantial, important hearts in terms of its lore in the whole game. So this is to do with the Soundless. The Soundless are a faction of Sylvari that, unlike both the Nightmare Core and us regular Sylvari, who are connected to the tree and the Dream of Dreams, these guys cut themselves off. So it's easy to just believe that these guys are like Nightmare Court, but remember, the Nightmare Court are deliberately being evil bastards because they want to influence the Dream of Dreams, so that new Sylvari that come out are also evil bastards. They want to steer the hive mind away from what it currently is. They believe that the hive mind, the dream, it was incorrectly influenced by the Ventari tablet, and they wanted to see its true nature, which are all good storylines, and what Heart of Thorns comes forward. The Soundless don't want to do that. So for the Nightmare Court to be successful, they need to stay connected, and so they are connected. But the Soundless are not that at all. The Soundless just want complete separation. They too may not agree with the way things are going, and that's why, you know, they've chosen to be different. But what they're doing is just isolating themselves. And really, the only place that you learn about the Soundless is there on that little island, and the NPCs that you can talk to as you do that heart on that little island. Which is fascinating, honestly. You know, you look at something like the Temple of the Ages saying this is where time began, and the devs just never really expand on it. But when it came to that Sylvari detail, it was expanded on later. And you find out that, you know, some important Soundless characters are finding themselves susceptible to the influences of Mordremoth and other things as the story goes along. And for a lot of players, when those other story beats come up, I wonder how many of them are like, who are the Soundless? Oh, right, they're those guys from that tiny little island at the start of the game. I think the reason that ArenaNet felt so confident to expand on the Soundless is because they really knew that they had people gripped in the Caledon Forest. In this map, most people who are having their formative early experiences of the game, which are the bits that we tend to remember more of, they're really engrossed and they're really enjoying it. So a lot of people like found the Soundless and it resonated with them, and they can hold it in their minds. So it's okay if like 4 years later during Living World Season 2 the devs start talking about the Soundless again. But do they have that same trust in people for going to the Temple of the Ages? Had they actually had answers to it or whatever? I don't think so. So anyway, I like that. And you know, I think as products, MMOs in general are always really fun when they take something that seems like a bit of an obscure detail and they really run with it later. You know, that can be the premise for entire expansions when you look at the way Blizzard does stuff. And I think that we get a little bit of that with Guild Wars. Just here. So this is a great place as well. This really captivated me when I very, very first was dealing with the Caledon Forest. Because here we find some strange ruins. Now, I already showed you how we overlap with Guild Wars 1 here. And, well, this was a lot of White Mantle activity in this area before. And so the White Mantle believed in the Masat and the Unseen ones. And this is called the Ruins of the Unseen. So immediately it got me thinking about the Masat and how exciting and cool they were as a race, and the stories of Lazarus and so on, which eventually did all come forward in the game again through Season 3 and so on. So, but back in 2012, I had no idea what ArenaNet had in store for us with the Masat storylines, but there was this weird place called the Ruins of the Unseen, and you know, wandering around here, by the way, this is a good example of the jumping puzzles being really tricky. This is for a Vista here, and you really do have to work for it. There's something really weird here, which is there's an Asura Golem wandering around, speaking as though it can see something that you can't. Now remember, the lore of the Masat is that they could kind of slip out of shift of this reality, they could like phase or whatever, and they could become invisible, and only by, you know, ascending and getting the gift of true sight could you see them. So our Guild Wars 2 character, if there were Masat here in these ruins, wouldn't necessarily be able to see them. But there's this golem wandering around, speaking to itself, acting as though there's stuff nearby. And I've always wondered, I don't think the devs ever confirmed, but I've always wondered if that golem is supposed to be seeing Masat and was supposed to be thinking about the Masat. You know, as far as the full game is concerned in 2012, they really didn't do much hinting about them. But I think they were there at that location. And it's pretty fun. We've kind of skipped over some little niches there. You know, the guild mission area I mentioned earlier, we've kind of skipped past. because there's no map completion objectives for us. This little town is another place that I spent a lot of time, particularly while producing my Guild Wars 2 personal story Let's Play, because the amount of ambient dialogue there is insane. All the Sylvari in that little town have stuff going on. There's no events that trigger there. There's no map completion stuff to do there. I don't know why any player would really linger. There's not even really many good services. But if you do linger, and I'm talking for like hours on end, you'll keep hearing different stuff that they have to say. All these little back and forths and conversations, which had largely been compiled by the wiki, but even weird little snippets in a lot of places around the game world hadn't been at the time. And maybe still that's true. But yeah, this map had a lot of that. And this outpost here too. So this is the Hanto trading post, is it? Let's see when we get the POI, if I've remembered that correctly. Yeah, the Hanto trading post. This is where the Lion Guards and the Tengu start interacting. Because of course we're on the Lion's Road, and we're also right next to the Dominion of Winds, the Tengu territory. And they have a bunch of cool dialogue. There's actually some good events as well that hook into that. There's an escort that ends up running all the way up there. And they'll say all kinds of things. And there's a personal story step that goes on. You just get such a good blend of different societies and things in this map. Maybe it's okay that we get to fight a lot of Risen here, because, you know, we get to play with the Hylek, we get to play with the Tengu, we get to play with, you know, the alternate versions of the Sylvari, all the different kind of Maguma fauna, the giant insects and so on. It's a good, colourful, varied map, and I like that a lot. I really do appreciate it. So here we're actually coming close to a mission area in Guild Wars 1. This is where the Sanctum K mission actually began. In Guild Wars 2 there's a whole bridge that kind of takes you to the island, which is weird. In Guild Wars 1 it's like a really big body of water separating this island, and in the sequel it's just this bridge. The bridge looks cool, don't get me wrong, the wall looks cool, this stuff's amazing. Being able to speak to the Tengu and hear them be voice acted in the sequel is amazing. This challenge isn't even too, you know, too bad in terms of being a complete pushover. Like, he'll survive a bit. That actually made us use our heal skill, which is brilliant. These guys just have so much fascinating stuff to say. This is a really, really, really cool place that I would keep your eye on, guys. If End of Dragons, taking us to Cantha, does actually introduce the Tengu as a playable race, I would expect the main entrance to be on the end of that bridge. That bridge, it may not be a closed chapter. I think eventually we will see that door on the far side open and we'll get to go inside. And that will be a hell of a day when it comes. But yeah, so just a cool part of the map again. We don't get to go inside. One of the interesting bits of trivia you guys might not know, but they revealed in the Guild Wars 2 official art book. Now, I'm talking about the original art book, not the 10-year anniversary one that I recently read on my channel, but the original art book. In that, they talk about how the original plans for the game, there were going to be 6 playable races, not the 5 we got, but Tengu were going to be playable as well. But very early on, they realized that they were biting off more than they could chew, and they cut the idea of the Tengu. But a lot of what they had produced or been thinking about for the stories for the Tengu, they just rolled into the Sylvari instead. So when you play early Sylvari story, you're actually playing what was originally penned to be Tengu's story. And you can see how these guys share a border. I love the idea of the game had all those races come out, because you would have had such a rich section of the world here, with the Sylvari bordered on the left by the Asura and bordered on the right by the Tengu. And here we're kind of in the center of all things, and also super close to Or. It's just a very cool idea, and hey, maybe one day that will even come true. Maybe. It's weird to think of a new low-level map getting added to the game in 2020. I think the devs could do some phenomenal stuff. I have so many problems with the open world and the way that this game works as an RPG that could be fixed in at least some way by the introduction of some new early game zones that are designed to be played by new characters. And maybe across that bridge is where you'd find that. Maybe. So we're moving kind of out of range of the Champion of the Sun meta now. It looks like some other players actually dealt with it. The Great Sun's beasts are at rest, it says there. And we just have a few more underwater hearts to do. One of them at the very north is going to be super easy, because we'll be dealing with the Crate, and they swarm in mass amounts. This area has an interesting Easter egg. There is, I think it's right around here, there is a organ that you can play, like it's a Quaggan instrument, or the Quaggan have found the instrument. It's down here, and if you key in Is it the Guild Wars 2 theme? I think you have to figure it out for yourself, but if you do it, there's like a clamshell next to it that opens up and you get some loot. That's my memory of it anyway. It's been a long time since I've done it. I'm sure I'm wrong. There's a similar Easter egg we'll be talking about when we get to Ebonhawk later. But it's a nice little thing that I found the Ebonhawk one way back. In fact, if you look really hard on my channel, you'll find I have a video going over the Easter eggs at Ebonhawk and all the story that came out of it. I loved that about the area. But this Quaggan one I didn't find until much later. Unfortunately, like most of the randomly generated loot, it was kind of a situation of 2 blues and a green. So not that captivating to most people, and, you know, maybe it's still quite hidden. But one of the Easter eggs down here, I've always quite liked. This area I was actually grinding at very recently. There's an achievement in the game that resets every day, which asks you to kill 10 crate. And once you've killed 10 crate, it triggers and gives you a key. It's called Blood in the Water. And you can take those keys to open special chests around the world. They give you a unique aqua breather skin that looks like a bubble of air around your head, and other minor benefits. It's a feature that's fairly new to the game, but I didn't interact with until super recently. And this was my place of choice, to kill the 10 crate each day. If you do fractals and stuff, you can get it from the fractals, because you'll quite regularly find crate over there. But yeah, I would log in and I would run over here, just kill a few crate and be done with it, and usually just get my key. As far as map completion's concerned, again, I think this area is very, very easy. I've never really spent the time doing this. Slave remains. That's very, very grim. You know, it's a corpse. I guess we're getting rid of them, burning them, sorting them out so that the Risen don't take control of them. That's weird, actually. I mean, they actually look like proper little bone piles there. I've never really got in game and inspected these. There you go. Look, I'm learning something here too, guys. We'll break open as many cells. I think actually going up onto the platform above is a really good shout. As long as you've obviously got the hero point and whatnot from underneath, it shouldn't be too difficult. This is really the very top right of the map. It connects to Keswick's Hills, which is between Queensdale, you know, in the middle of here and Queensdale, just to give you guys a sense of how we're starting to surround that map now. But I guess we're actually going to be heading off to the west. Now, I really like this area as well. The devs have got roller beetle races in the game now, and I feel like this would be such a great place for one. There's a lot of very drastic atmosphere tweaks here. As you enter a kind of swampy area, all the lighting changes, all the roads are really narrow and bumpy and cobbled, and they just feel really, really good to go zooming around on a roller beetle. Starting off at this fort for the Lion Guard, where we got to do some jumping puzzle stuff. This one's actually not too bad, because look, they give you these nice, thick, wide platforms, and they sort of suggest that you need to get on that thin one there, but most of the time you can skip over them. I do apologize, sort of, that we're not getting the vistas. I have already shown all of the vistas through other series on my channel. If we were stopping to watch and see the sights, I think these videos would be a lot longer. So the quick skips on the vistas, I think, is perfectly fair, since we're managed to get through so fast. Good amount of dynamic events here as well. As you can see, we're already in range of 2. There's a very fun one where a great fire starts by a tree because of these imps. You got to put it out and you got to kill the imps before it's too late. I always tend to remember. But yeah, look at these roads and look at how it starts to rain and it gets cloudy. It's a nice part of the map. This is kind of what I would have expected more of in Kryta. And Kryta does still have some swamps, but I think this is probably one of the best like feeling swamps in the game. The fog feels just right. The colors, all of the roots and things dangling down, and you can really get a sense of why the Lion Road is very important too. If you guys don't know about the Lion Road, this road literally does connect all the main cities in the game to Lion's Arch. If you follow that road long enough, you will get to Lion's Arch. Or if you take the right turns, left and right or whatever, you'll find yourself right on the doorstep of Divinity's Reach or Holbrack or the Black Citadel. You know, not quite all the way up to these places, but very, very close to them. And the idea is it's kind of the Lion Guard have connected the world. And, you know, that's represented through the personal story too, in a way. You know, where everyone meets up is Lion's Arch, and it's through that we actually start to collaborate and deal with the dragons. Of course, there's all the stuff with the Pact later, but where did the Pact really flash into existence? Well, with the Lion Guard over at Claw Island. So here is where we would deal with the world boss, the Battle for Wickmire Swamp. People should be well familiar with this. There's a very cool vista here, if we looked up, these cliffs will actually reveal some tortured looking faces in the roots and the foliage staring down at us. And they overlook this large arena area of swamp, which is where we would actually fight the worm. I think a lot of people know about that one because a lot of people tend to stand here waiting for the worm. In fact, you just saw that there was a hero banner in this area. I'm 100% convinced that that's there because people were just doing the world boss a moment ago. Well, not within the most recent half an hour, however long it takes for them to despawn. So yeah, people stand around there usually see that. There's also an interesting little hint as well about the nature of why some of these enemies are attacking us, because there are husks that spawn there in conjunction with this giant worm attack, and it was way later in the Heart of Thorns expansion you kind of got to see a little bit of why the husks might have been connected to all that stuff. And this of course is the dungeon entrance as well to Twilight Arbor. I actually really don't like this dungeon entrance just because of all these enemies. You see, using mass invisibility here just to not over aggro like mad. But usually grouping for this dungeon was a pain because almost anywhere you were standing, sometimes a freaking nightmare court would rush off down the side and suddenly put you in combat. It'd be very irritating. But overall, not too bad. And that's the last waypoint there. That is actually flanking another entrance to the Asura lands of Metrica Province. One of the only starter maps we haven't seen now. We get this nice event here with this jungle troll. Essentially, you get some members of the Lion Guard patrolling the road. The troll jumps out and attacks them, and then goes over there. You can kill him and you know, help them out. In fact, I think that's them over there. Merchant Trundle, was that his name? I'm not quite sure what the mosquito larva is all about. These interactables down there. Mosquito. I guess you just pop them. Yeah, alright, you just pop them for the heart. Just run around and kill things. I feel like if I pop mosquito larva, mosquitoes shouldn't appear. Isn't the point that we're stopping them in their crib, shall we say? But maybe these are, you know, the parents that come along and they attack us. Either way, it's kind of good. Anywhere you find in a heart that you can press F, you get progress, and then that spawns a creature that you can kill for even more progress. That's like the dream, really, and that's what you're always looking out for with hearts as you go through. You get those double whammies in there, especially if it's AoE also. And by bringing a Zerg, sometimes you can trigger the same thing over and over and over again. And with that done, that's the whole map. Really, really clean, very nice. The completion of Caledon Forest, starting zone of the Sylvari. One of my favorite starter maps. It's absolutely gorgeous. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll see you for the next one tomorrow.